Blood dripped from Thaddeus Bell's chest onto the cracked desert ground as he dragged himself behind a boulder. 3 bullets lodged deep in his ribs. The metallic taste in his mouth told him everything he needed to know. He was dying, and fast. 20 minutes earlier, he'd been riding through Apache territory when 5 outlaws ambushed him for the bounty on his head. Now 4 of them lay dead, but their leader had put enough lead in Thaddeus to finish the job. His horse was gone. His water canteen had 3 holes in it, and the nearest town was 15 miles through hostile desert. Thaddeus pressed his back against the rock, feeling his life drain away with each labored breath. His vision blurred as he tried to focus on the horizon. That's when he saw it. A wooden cross silhouetted against the blazing afternoon sun, maybe 200 yards ahead. But this wasn't a grave marker. Something was moving on it. Fighting through the pain, he squinted harder. A person was tied to that cross. Alive. Thaddeus forced himself to crawl forward, leaving a crimson trail in the sand. Each movement sent lightning through his chest, but he kept going. As he got closer, his blood ran cold. It was a young indigenous girl, maybe 16 years old, her dark hair hanging over her face. Her wrists were bound with rawhide to the crossbeam, her feet barely touching the ground. But what made Thaddeus's dying heart skip was the piece of paper nailed to the wood above her head. Even from 50 yards away, he could make out the crude letters scrawled in what looked like charcoal. "Leave me if you're not ready." The girl's head lifted slightly. Their eyes met across the desert wasteland. She wasn't crying or screaming. She was watching him with a calm that chilled him more than any desert wind. It was as if she'd been waiting for him specifically. Thaddeus felt something twist in his gut that had nothing to do with the bullet wounds. In 30 years of violence and bloodshed, he'd seen plenty of cruelty, but this was different. This was a test, the kind that determined what a man was really made of when everything else was stripped away. He thought about his own sins, the lives he'd taken, the chances he'd missed to do right. Here he was, minutes from meeting his maker, and life had dropped one final choice in his lap. The message burned in his mind. Leave me if you're not ready. Ready for what? Ready to die trying to save someone else? Ready to use his last breath for something decent? Ready to prove that even a killer could find redemption in his final moments? But as Thaddeus tried to stand, his legs gave out completely. He collapsed face first into the sand, and when he looked up again, he noticed something that made his blood freeze. The girl wasn't alone after all. 3 Apache warriors sat motionless on horseback in the shade of a mesa about 500 yards beyond the cross. They'd been there the whole time, watching, waiting. Thaddeus's mind raced through the implications. This wasn't a random act of cruelty by outlaws. This was something far more complex. The Apache had put the girl on that cross themselves, and now they were testing whoever found her. The message wasn't written by bandits. It was written by her own people. He forced himself up on his elbows, studying the warriors. Even at this distance, he could see they were armed with rifles, not just bows. Modern weapons. These weren't desperate renegades. They were organized, disciplined, and they had him exactly where they wanted him. The girl on the cross turned her head toward the Apache. Then back to Thaddeus. Her lips moved, but no sound reached him. Whatever she was trying to communicate, it was urgent. Thaddeus felt another wave of blood loss hit him. His vision darkened at the edges, and he knew he had maybe 10 minutes of consciousness left. Maybe less. The smart play was obvious. Stay hidden behind the boulder. Let himself slip away peacefully, and avoid whatever trap the Apache had set. But something about the girl's eyes wouldn't let him do that. There was no fear in them, only a strange kind of hope, as if she believed he was different from whoever else might have passed this way. He started crawling again, each movement a monumental effort. The Apache warriors didn't move. They just watched him struggle across the open ground like a wounded animal. It occurred to Thaddeus that they could have killed him already if they wanted to. Whatever this was about, they needed him alive long enough to make his choice. When he was 30 yards from the cross, he could finally make out the girl's words. She was speaking in accented English, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Ayana. I chose this." Thaddeus stopped crawling. "What?" "I chose this," she repeated, louder now. "My people. They need to know if the white man can still choose honor over comfort. I volunteered to be the test." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't an execution or a punishment. It was a ceremony, a ritual designed to measure the character of whoever found her. and somehow, he'd stumbled into the middle of it while dying. "The message," Thaddeus gasped. "What does it mean?" Ayanna's dark eyes locked onto his. "It means you have to decide what kind of man you want to die as. You can leave me here and pass on peacefully, or you can try to save me knowing it will cost you everything you have left." Thaddeus felt his strength fading fast. The Apache warriors remained perfectly still, like statues carved from stone. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and he could smell the metallic scent of his own blood pooling in the sand beneath him. "What happens if I try to free you?" Ayanna's expression didn't change. "Then you'll find out if you're really ready to die for someone else's life." That's when Thaddeus heard the sound that made his heart stop. Hoofbeats approaching from behind him. The Apache warriors weren't the only ones watching this unfold. Thaddeus twisted his neck to see behind him, every movement sending fresh agony through his bullet wounds. 2 riders emerged from a dust cloud, their horses moving at a steady trot. Not Apache. These were white men, and from their weathered appearance and the way they sat their saddles, they were experienced desert travelers. The lead rider was a tall man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. His companion was younger, maybe 25, with nervous energy written all over his face. Both wore gun belts and had the hard look of men who'd killed before. They reined in their horses about 50 feet from where Thaddeus lay bleeding in the sand. The older man dismounted slowly, his hand resting casually on his pistol grip. "Well, well," the man said, his voice carrying easily across the desert air. "Looks like we got ourselves a situation here, Crawford." The younger rider, Crawford, stayed mounted, but drew his rifle. "That's the Bell kid. Ain't it, Pike? The one with the bounty?" Pike nodded, never taking his eyes off Thaddeus. $500, dead or alive. Though from the looks of him, dead's about to take care of itself. Thaddeus tried to speak, but only managed a wet cough that brought up more blood. Pike walked closer, just out of arm's reach, studying the scene with calculating eyes. "Interesting setup we got here," Pike continued, gesturing toward the cross. "Apache girl strung up like that, and old Thaddeus Bell crawling toward her like some kind of dying hero. You boys having a religious moment out here." Crawford laughed nervously. "What you reckon that sign says, Pike?" "Don't matter what it says," Pike replied. "What matters is, we got a dying man, a helpless Indian girl, and nobody around for miles to witness what happens next." Thaddeus felt a surge of desperate anger cut through his weakness. These men weren't here by accident. They'd been tracking him, waiting for the perfect moment to collect their bounty without a fight. Now they'd stumbled into something they didn't understand, and that made them dangerous to everyone. "The Apache," Thaddeus managed to whisper. "They're watching." Pike glanced toward the mesa where the 3 warriors sat motionless. "I see 'em. Been wondering when they'd make their move, but they're keeping their distance for now, which tells me this little display is more important to them than taking scalps." Crawford shifted uneasily in his saddle. "Maybe we should just collect our money and get out of here, Pike. This feels wrong." "Wrong?" Pike's laugh was harsh. "Boy, we've been chasing this killer for 3 weeks through hostile territory. Now we find him bleeding out, and you want to ride away because of some Apache ceremony?" Pike drew his pistol and walked closer to Thaddeus. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to put you out of your misery. Collect my bounty, and then Crawford and I are going to have ourselves some fun with that little Indian princess over there." But as Pike raised his gun, Ayanna's voice cut through the desert silence with words that changed everything. "Touch me, and your entire bloodline dies screaming." Ayanna's words weren't spoken in anger or fear. They came out calm and certain, like a simple statement of fact. Pike's gun hand froze halfway to Thaddeus's head. "What did you say, girl?" "I am the daughter of Chief Nayeli of the Chiricahua. Those warriors watching us are my brothers. This ceremony is sacred, and if you interfere, they will hunt your families to the ends of the earth." Crawford's rifle barrel dropped slightly. "Pike, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Pike snapped, but Thaddeus could see uncertainty creeping into his eyes. Every man who'd spent time in Apache territory knew the stories. The Chiricahua didn't just kill their enemies, they made examples that lasted generations. Thaddeus seized the moment of confusion. Despite the agony tearing through his chest, he rolled toward Pike's legs and grabbed the man's ankle with what little strength he had left. Pike stumbled, his shot going wide into the desert air. The sound echoed off the surrounding rocks like thunder, and immediately the 3 Apache warriors began moving down from their position. "You stupid—" Pike kicked free and raised his gun again, but Crawford's shout stopped him. "Pike, they're coming!" The Apache weren't charging. They were advancing at a measured pace, rifles ready but not yet aimed. It was more ominous than any wild attack could have been. These were disciplined warriors making a statement. They were in control here, not the bounty hunters. Thaddeus used Pike's distraction to drag himself closer to the cross. Each movement left him weaker, but he forced himself to keep going. Ayanna watched him struggle, her expression unreadable. "You don't understand," she said quietly as he reached the base of the cross. "The test isn't whether you can free me. The test is whether you'll try, knowing what it costs." What does it cost?" Thaddeus gasped, his hands shaking as he reached for the rawhide binding her feet. "Everything. Your life, your chance at peace, your final moments of comfort. If you cut me down, those men will kill you. If you don't, you'll die knowing you chose yourself over an innocent." Pike had recovered his composure and was backing toward his horse, but he kept his gun trained on Thaddeus. "Get away from her, Belle. This doesn't concern you anymore." Crawford was already mounting up. "Pike, we need to go. Now." But Pike wasn't listening. The approaching Apache had triggered something prideful and stupid in him. "No Indian girl is going to threaten me, and no half-dead outlaw is going to play hero on my watch." Thaddeus's fingers found the knot holding Ayanna's feet. It was tight, soaked with sweat and pulled hard by her weight. With his strength fading, it would take everything he had left to work it loose. "Choose quickly," Ayanna whispered. "My brothers are 30 seconds away, and they won't wait for your decision." Thaddeus looked up at her face, then back at Pike's gun, then at the approaching warriors. His entire life had led to this moment, a choice between dying easy or dying right. But as he started working at the knot, Pike's voice cut through the desert air with a tone that promised violence. "Crawford, forget the horses. Kill them all." Crawford's rifle cracked like a whip, but his shot went high as his horse spooked at the approaching Apache. The bullet splintered wood from the cross just inches above Ayanna's head. Thaddeus felt the rawhide knot give way under his bloody fingers, just as Pike's pistol swung toward him. Time slowed to a crawl as he saw Pike's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Crawford working the lever action on his rifle for another shot, saw the 3 Apache warriors raise their own weapons. But something impossible happened. Despite the bullets in his chest, despite the blood loss that should have killed him minutes ago, Thaddeus felt a surge of strength flow through his limbs. Not the desperate energy of a dying man, but something deeper. Something that came from finally choosing to do right instead of easy. He lunged upward, his shoulder catching Pike in the midsection just as the gun fired. The bullet meant for his head buried itself in the sand where he'd been lying. Pike crashed backward, his head striking a rock with a sickening crack. Crawford's second shot boomed across the desert, but Thaddeus was already moving. He grabbed Pike's fallen pistol and rolled behind the cross as the bullet whined past his ear. "Ayanna!" he shouted, working frantically at the bonds holding her wrists. "When I cut you loose, run toward your brothers." "No," she said firmly. "Not until you understand." "Understand what?" Thaddeus snapped as Crawford's third shot splintered wood near his head. "This was never about saving me. It was about saving you." Thaddeus paused, his hands still working at the rawhide. "What are you talking about? You've spent 30 years taking lives. Today was your chance to give one back, to prove that even a killer can choose redemption when it matters most." Crawford's horse thundered closer, and Thaddeus could hear the young bounty hunter cursing as he tried to get a clear shot. But the Apache warriors were closing in too, their war cries echoing off the canyon walls. "I don't understand," Thaddeus said, finally freeing one of Ayanna's wrists. "You will," she replied, dropping to the ground beside him. "When you realize you're not dying anymore." Thaddeus stopped moving. The pain in his chest was gone. The weakness, the blood loss, the crushing weight of impending death, all of it had vanished. He looked down at his shirt, expecting to see the spreading crimson stains, but found only old fabric worn thin by desert travel. "How is this possible?" Ayanna smiled for the first time since he'd found her. "Because you chose to die for someone else instead of living for yourself. And sometimes, that choice changes everything." Crawford's rifle cracked again, closer now, but Thaddeus barely heard it. He was staring at his hands, steady, strong, without a tremor, at his chest, rising and falling with easy, painless breaths. If you're enjoying this story of redemption and sacrifice, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started with tales from the Old West that will change how you see courage and choice. But as the realization of what had happened began to sink in, Crawford appeared around the cross with his rifle aimed directly at Ayana's heart. "Don't move or I'll put a hole through her," Crawford snarled, his young face twisted with fear and desperation. Sweat poured down his cheeks despite the desert heat, and his hands shook as he tried to keep the rifle steady. Thaddeus raised Pike's pistol slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. The strange transformation he'd experienced had left him feeling more focused than he'd been in years. "Easy, son. You don't want to do this." "The hell I don't," Crawford's voice cracked. "Pike's dead. The Apache are coming. And I ain't leaving here empty-handed. That bounty money is mine now." The 3 Apache warriors had closed to within 100 yards, but they'd stopped their advance. They sat their horses in perfect stillness, watching the standoff unfold, waiting to see how it would end. "Look around you, boy," Thaddeus said quietly. "Your partner's skull is cracked open. You're outnumbered, and you're standing in the middle of sacred Apache ground. The smart play is to ride out while you still can." Crawford's eyes darted between Thaddeus, Ayana, and the watching warriors. "Sacred ground? This is just desert." Ayana stepped forward slightly, her voice carrying an otherworldly calm. "This is where my people come to test the spirits of men, where we separate those who choose honor from those who choose fear." "I ain't afraid of no Indian spirits," Crawford shot back, but his rifle barrel trembled noticeably. "You should be," Thaddeus said, taking a step closer. "Because right now, you're failing the test." That's when something extraordinary happened. The desert around them began to change. The harsh afternoon light softened, taking on an amber quality that made everything look dreamlike. The wind, which had been still moments before, began to whisper through the rocks with an almost musical sound. Crawford noticed it too. His eyes widened as he looked around at the shifting landscape. "What's happening?" "You're seeing what this place really is," Ayana explained. "A gateway between the world of the living and the world of spirits. A place where choices echo through eternity." Thaddeus felt the truth of her words in his bones. This wasn't just desert anymore. It was something far older and more powerful. A testing ground where the fundamental nature of a man's soul was laid bare. "Crawford," he said, his voice taking on a commanding tone he hadn't used in years. "You have a choice to make. You can pull that trigger and damn yourself forever, or you can walk away and find a different path." The young bounty hunter's face was pale now, his breathing rapid and shallow. I need that money. My sister's sick. And the doctor bills. "Then find another way to earn it," Thaddeus replied. "One that doesn't involve threatening innocent girls in sacred places." Crawford's resolve wavered. The rifle barrel dropped a few inches as he struggled with the decision. Around them, the desert continued its subtle transformation, becoming something that existed between worlds. "I don't understand what's happening here," Crawford whispered. "Neither did I," Thaddeus admitted. "But sometimes understanding comes after the choice, not before." For a long moment, the only sound was the desert wind carrying its impossible music across the rocks. Then Crawford made his decision. But what he chose would determine not just his fate, but the fate of everyone standing in that mystical space between life and death. Crawford's rifle clattered to the ground as he dropped it and backed away, his hands raised in surrender. I can't do this. Whatever this place is, whatever's happening here, I want no part of it." The moment his weapon hit the sand, the desert seemed to exhale. The golden light brightened, and the musical wind grew stronger, carrying with it the sound of distant drums that seemed to come from the earth itself. Thaddeus lowered Pike's pistol, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over him. "You made the right choice, son." Crawford stumbled toward his horse, his movements clumsy with fear and confusion. "Keep your bounty, Belle. Keep all of it. I'm getting out of here before something worse happens." As Crawford mounted up and spurred his horse into a desperate gallop away from the sacred ground, the 3 Apache warriors finally moved. But instead of pursuit, they rode forward slowly, their weapons lowered in a gesture of respect. The eldest of the 3, a man with silver-streaked hair and deep lines around his eyes, dismounted near the cross. He spoke to Ayana in their native tongue, his voice filled with what sounded like pride and reverence. "He says the test is complete," Ayana translated for Thaddeus. "Both tests, actually. Yours and Crawford's." "Both tests?" Ayana nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the strange golden light that continued to bathe the desert. "Every man who finds me here faces the same choice you did, but few make the right one. And even fewer inspire the same choice in others. The elderly Apache warrior approached Thaddeus and placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. When he spoke, it was in heavily accented but clear English. "You were dead, white man, shot through the heart, bleeding your life into our sacred earth. But your choice to die for another brought you back. This is powerful medicine." Thaddeus looked down at his chest again, still amazed by the absence of pain or blood. "I don't understand how this is possible. Some things cannot be understood, only experienced," the warrior replied. "You have been given a second chance at life. What will you do with it?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a sacred fire. Thaddeus thought about his past, the violence and bloodshed that had defined his existence for 30 years. Then he thought about the moment he'd chosen to crawl toward that cross, knowing it would cost him everything. "I want to be different," he said quietly. "I want to use whatever time I have left to build instead of destroy." The Apache warrior smiled, deep lines crinkling around his eyes. "Then you understand the true purpose of the test. It was never about saving Ayanna. It was about saving yourself." Ayanna stepped forward and untied the message from the cross. She handed the piece of paper to Thaddeus, and when he read it again, the words had changed. But what it said now would alter the course of his entire remaining life. The paper now read, "Welcome home, protector of the innocent." Thaddeus stared at the words, feeling their weight settle into his soul like stones finding their place in a riverbed. The message wasn't written in charcoal anymore. It appeared to be burned into the paper by some invisible hand. "Home?" he asked, looking around at the transformed desert landscape. The elderly Apache warrior gestured toward the horizon, where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "This land has been waiting for someone like you, someone who understands that true strength comes from protecting others, not harming them." Ayanna moved to stand beside Thaddeus, her presence radiating the same peaceful energy that now filled the entire area. "My people have been guardians of this sacred place for generations, but we need allies in the changing world, men who can walk between our people and yours, building bridges instead of burning them." Thaddeus felt something shift inside him, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. For 30 years, he'd been searching for meaning in a life filled with violence. Now, standing in this mystical space between worlds, he understood that everything had led to this moment. "What about my past? The men I've killed? The wrongs I've done?" The Apache warrior placed both hands on Thaddeus's shoulders, his grip firm and reassuring. "A man is not defined by who he was, but by who he chooses to become. You died to save an innocent. That death washed away your old life. What you do with your new one is up to you." The golden light began to fade as the sun touched the horizon, but the sense of peace and purpose remained strong. The three warriors mounted their horses preparing to leave, but the elderly one turned back to Thaddeus one final time. "There will be others who find their way here. Lost souls, broken people, those seeking redemption or running from their past. Some will be worthy of help, others will not. You will know the difference." As the Apache rode away into the gathering dusk, Ayanna began walking toward a narrow canyon that Thaddeus hadn't noticed before. "Come," she said, "let me show you your new home." They walked together through the canyon, their footsteps echoing softly off the rock walls. Hidden springs created small oases of green vegetation, and Thaddeus could see cave openings that had been carved into comfortable dwellings over countless generations. "This is where you'll live now," Ayanna explained, "where you'll wait for those who need guidance, protection, or simply a second chance at choosing right over wrong." Thaddeus stopped walking and looked back toward the cross, which was now barely visible in the fading light. "Will I see you again?" Ayanna smiled, and for a moment she seemed to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer sand. "I'll be wherever innocent people need protection. Sometimes you'll see me, sometimes you won't, but you'll always know when you're needed." As the last light faded from the sky, Thaddeus understood that his old life was truly over. Thaddeus Bell the killer was dead, buried in the sand beside that wooden cross. The man who remained was something new, a guardian, a protector, a bridge between worlds. He thought about Crawford, riding hard toward whatever life awaited him, carrying the memory of his choice at the sacred testing ground. He thought about all the others who would find their way here in time, facing their own moments of truth, and for the first time in 30 years, Thaddeus Bell smiled with genuine peace in his heart. If you enjoyed this story of redemption and second chances, Don't forget to subscribe for more tales that will remind you that it's never too late to choose a different path. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with an ending so surprising you won't forget it anytime soon. Click on the video now.